We are live, ladies and gentlemen. We are live. That's right. The date today is, I was going to say Sunday, but it's actually Monday. January the 21st, 2019. And this is episode 9 of Two Dudes and Some Bullshit. And of course, we didn't do the show yesterday because Tony, why didn't we do that show yesterday?
Because the Patriots are going to the Super Bowl.
The Patriots are going to the Super Bowl again. I am convinced that there is a conspiracy. There is an absolute conspiracy. It is not possible. I know. I feel really bad for my brother Neil.
We're supposed to be finished. We're done. We're too old. That's all the analysts have been saying all season. It's over. I think I love this Super Bowl appearance more than any of them, just for that simple fact that it was guaranteed. They guaranteed that we were done, and just goes to show you can't count out Tom Brady and the Patriots. Great game, though. I mean, if you're a football fan, both games that were played yesterday was a lot of fun to watch. The Rams, and the Saints were an overtime game, one on a field goal. Patriots and the Chiefs game, same thing, went to overtime, one on a last or first drive for New England. So both, I think if you're a football fan in general, I think everybody enjoyed the day. But yeah, needless to say, I'm one happy camper on this Monday, whereas the rest of the country is pretty pissed off.
Yes, indeed. Before I say what I was about to say, I noticed we got a super chat from Tom Ferreira, whatever. I appreciate that, Tom. But do not, if you are thinking about donating to the show and the channel through super chat, of course, we really appreciate that. However, leave that until the end when we open up the floor to questions, because we don't take questions right off the bat. And then if you give a super chat now, it's just going to go up the thing, and I'm not even going to forget about it. And, and I always like to, do the best we can to answer the questions, specifically, of course, for those who have been kind enough to donate to the channel. So I've written your question down here, Tom, because it's going to go up the screen very shortly. But for anybody else who's thinking about doing that, wait till towards the end when we actually open it up for questions. So I feel bad for my brother Neil because he's a Kansas City Chiefs fan.
My brother Nick, he's it's funny, Nick. God, man, this is creepy, with the comparisons.
It is.
And he's a Chiefs fan as well too. So I took it easy on him because there was two sides to it. Like I've seen the Patriots now. I mean, they've been to the Super Bowl. This is their 10th time in the franchise career. A lot of times people forget about the mid-90s appearance we had where we lost to the Packers. 8 times, obviously, with Brady. So it's like there's the fan of, the fanboy inside of me, want to support my team and see him win. But because my brother's a Chiefs fan, he's never seen the Chiefs play in the Super Bowl. So there was a side of me like, all right, if the Chiefs beat us, I'm cool with it because then my brother is going to get a shot at seeing the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. But unfortunately, that is not the case. And the Super Bowl is being played here in Atlanta, which I will be at in 2 weeks. So I'm actually going to finally see the Patriots in a Super Bowl, which is pretty dope.
And that's why I am convinced there is a conspiracy. Brady, you don't need another fucking ring. Get out. I am convinced there is a conspiracy to just keep pumping like the Warriors in basketball. I am convinced that they're paid and bought for. Anyway.
Yes, and just to correct someone, it is in the chat room. It is only 10 times. 8 times with Brady, once in the 90s, and then once in the 80s when we lost to the Bears. So it is only 10, not 11. So, but yeah, I feel you. I understand, and I feel for your brother today and the rest of the country who's pretty much pissed off and have had it. But on the flip side of it, from a historic, we're never going to see this. I mean, what the Patriots done since 2001, 8 Super Bowl appearances. They've been to the AFC Championship now 8 years in a row. We'll never see this in our lifetime again. The moment Brady and Belichick retire, I mean, it's going to be a long, long drought. And I wonder how many weather fans, for Patriot fans now that are out there that are going to, bandwagon this team when the day comes and, we're back in the 80s again and we're not the premier team and, we may not be making the playoffs. I've shared that story with you many times where me and my grandfather, we used to listen to Pats games on the radio because we were so bad in the 80s. No network gave us any coverage.
That's right.
We had to listen to them on the radio. I couldn't even watch them play. So, but I get it. I get it from the overall perspective. If you're a fan of the other 28 plus teams in the league, it's like, hey, we want to see some new faces. But if you're a Patriots fan, you're like, yeah, let's just keep riding this wave until we know the eventual end is very near. Like I was starting to say, the gratification of this, more so than the recent Super Bowl appearance over the last 17 years, is that you've got professional announcers and analysts. I'm telling you, dude, all season long, guys like Max Kellerman. He's one of the ESPN's top analysts, guaranteeing it that the Patriots are done. We're not going to go to the Super Bowl. It's over, and here we are, going back to the Super Bowl. Just makes me wonder, how can I get a job as an ESPN analyst and look like an idiot and guarantee something and the total opposite happens? I want that job.
Well, one more time. It's a conspiracy. I'm telling you, it's a conspiracy.
All right, let's go.
All right, let's do this. Okay, so today we are talking about A Nightmare on Elm Street, the series, the franchise, the past, the present, the future. Tony, tell me the first time you watched A Nightmare on Elm Street, or the first your first memory of Elm Street and what movie it was.
I can tell you the exact moment. This was in 1986, and it was the first horror movie that I ever saw. And me and my sister and my brother were being babysat, and the babysitter showed the movie to me and my sister. My brother was an infant; he was like barely 1 year old, so he has no recollection of this.
The very first movie?
This is the very first horror movie that I ever saw.
No, but I mean the first Elm Street film,
yes,
like part one?
The very first 1984 Elm Street. And I remember it vividly. We were sitting there on her couch in her living room, and I'm eating it, watching popcorn. And I'm just like, whoa, this is the greatest thing ever. My sister at the time watching it seemed fine. It wasn't until later on that night when we were back home, and I had like this clear as day memory of her standing outside of my bedroom crying off the top of her lungs. I mean, literally crying off the top of her lungs, freaking out, like thinking that Freddy Krueger is coming after her. I mean, I feel bad for her because my sister at the time was, if 86, I was what, 6? What were we?
7.
6, 7. So she's 5. Okay. She's 5 years old. And it's like, whatever. And she's freaking out and whatnot. But that was the first horror movie I ever saw. And it was great. And I got hooked on horror movies ever since. What about you? When was the first time you saw Nightmare?
I think my first introduction to Freddy Krueger might have been A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. I may have watched Freddy's Revenge first, then watched the first one. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think that might have been the way it went. It definitely was in the mid, 80s in the same kind of way. I had 2 older brothers, or I do have 2 older brothers. And so, they were into Freddy, especially my brother Neil. And I would sit and watch them. I got into a lot of the horror characters because of them. Same with Halloween and Michael Myers and, Jason. So it's the same kind of thing. And I remember, I think I've told this, but before, because back in the 80s, of course, they did not sell, certainly in the from 84, 85, 86. I think once you got to 87, once Elm Street 3 came out, and especially Elm Street 4 came out in 88, and Freddy Krueger himself started to enter the pop culture consciousness, you could buy the Freddy glove, that one with the plastic knives.
the cheesy one from the 80s. I remember that. Yeah, right. I totally remember that.
But that wasn't always available. No. And before that, I remember I wanted to be Freddy Krueger, so I took a winter glove and I took 4 ballpoint pens like that, and I taped them to the glove. I taped them to the glove, and I would go outside with my friends and I'd walk around with these pens. Well, now, I mean, I didn't think anything of it at the time, but now looking back at it, it's like, fuck, this is like a lethal weapon. Like I could just go up to somebody on the street and like stab them with like all 4 pens and like, inject them with poisonous ink or something like that right into their veins. But
well, that's the cool shit that we did back in the day, where we didn't have the availability of the gloves that are out there now that you can buy online that are almost like replicas from the original. I've even seen it on your video a few times where you had the glove on your hand and whatnot. We didn't have any of that. I mean, we talked about this back, with the Michael Myers mask and the costumes that we had to improvise and get creative and put a costume together, whether it was Freddy, Michael, or Jason. My God, even the Jason hockey mask that you would get in the stores were absolutely atrocious.
I remember making my own.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But there's something, I don't know, there's something about that that I like. It's because it's the creativeness. You're having to craft something together, use your imagination to create, whether it's the Freddy glove or the Jason mask or whatever. And I remember that ingenuity that we had to do as kids.
I remember this funny story, and it was and it's still kind of sad and embarrassing, but I remember, I don't remember the finer details because this is over 30 years ago now, but I remember I was invited to Jamie Hunt's house, and Jamie Hunt was a big Freddy Krueger fan, and it was a Halloween party where, I don't know, 7, 8, something like that, and I think maybe we were all getting together and then we were all going to go trick-or-treating or something like that. And I wanted to dress up as Freddy Krueger. Well, but Jamie, I don't know why I didn't have it, because it's not like we were poor or anything like that. Maybe it was all sold out and I just didn't get around to getting it. But I didn't have an authentic Freddy Krueger costume. Well, Jamie Hunt did. He had that latex little mask and the glove with the knives and the hat, the foam hat, and
I remember that.
Yeah. Well, that's what he had. And I remember when I went
something similar to that in the stores. With, oh my God, it was a god awful. I mean, now in hindsight, at the time it was epic, but we had, that it was like, I don't want to say it was not like the plastic masks that you would get as a kid, like the costumes that we would wear with the plastic mask that would have the little strap on the back, and you'd have like that really crappy, like, plasticky type jumpsuit or whatever. It was He-Man or something that you were wearing. They had one very similar with Freddy Krueger, because I remember that vividly, seeing that in the store as a kid, even though my parents wouldn't let me, wear that as a costume until I was a little bit older. And I actually never did. I never did Freddy.
That's funny. Yeah, no, I wanted to. And like I said, like I'm at this little party, and I was there and I had like my winter glove with the ballpoint pens, or I think I had to take the pens off because my mother wouldn't allow me to go over there with pens. So I think I cut out cardboard knives, and of course you're a kid, so you're not cutting them, they're not the same size, so it just more looks like, a claw or something like that. And then of course I had like this little hat or whatever that was like a old cowboy hat, but it was meshed together and pulled down and all this stuff. And but what was so funny about it is I remember Jamie's sister, I think it was his older sister, maybe it was his mother, and of course I'm sitting on the couch ready to go in my costume, and I remember the sister came over and said to me, "Okay, we're all ready to go. We're going to go. Everybody, let's go." And they come over, and she comes over to me and she goes, "Okay, Dave, do you have your costume?" And of course, in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm wearing it, and it was so embarrassing because obviously I don't look anything like Freddy Krueger.
Sure.
Right. I mean, obviously that's like, what you're supposed to be Freddy Krueger. You kind of maybe look like his cousin Bob Krueger or something, some imposter, because you couldn't compare to what Jamie was wearing with the actual glove and the stuff. So that was a little embarrassing, but it was a fun time. I mean, Freddy Krueger, I have said this many times, and I even did one of the first videos I did on this channel when I started to put my face out there more, was a video entitled, "Is Michael Myers a Horror Icon of the 80s?" And I even did one of the first videos I did on this channel when I started to put my face out there more, was a video entitled, "Is Michael Myers a Horror Icon of the 80s?" And I even did one of the first videos I did on this channel when I started to put my face out there more, was a video entitled, "Is Michael Myers a Horror Icon of the 80s?" And I'm telling you right now, for those of you that did not grow up in the 80s, did not live through the 80s, I'm telling you that Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees
Owned.
ruled
Yeah,
the
owned
1980s.
the
They
80s.
owned the 80s.
Michael Myers
Michael Myers
nothing.
was nothing. He
Not even
was
a footnote.
nothing. He wasn't even a footnote. He was nothing. And the reason for that is because Michael Myers' story seemingly ended in 1981.
Right.
And then 82, 83, 84, right? 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87. You had 7 years before there was another Michael Myers movie. And in that 7 years, you had a boatload of Freddy and Jason films, and they entered the pop culture consciousness, you know, and they were out there with,
Freddy goes all MTV, you know.
Oh, absolutely.
And
And then
the TV series as well, too, with Nightmare, Freddy's
Right.
Nightmare or something like that.
Yes, that's right. And then what ends up happening is Michael makes his return. See, horror changed, okay? Halloween 2 came out in 1981 on the cusp of horror changing. Halloween in 78 changed the face of horror because people realized that, wow, we can make pretty decent horror movies for next to nothing and make boatloads of money. Okay, so along comes Friday the 13th, along comes A Nightmare on Elm Street, along comes all these other little independent horror films. Some are successful, most aren't. The most successful, of course, in the early 80s being Friday the 13th. And but Michael's story ended in 81, and then they kept making Friday the 13th movies. And then in 84 comes Freddy, in 85 comes Freddy, in 87 comes Freddy, in 88 comes Freddy. And they just took over, and Michael was nowhere to be seen. Nobody cared about Michael. They weren't making Michael Myers masks. He wasn't in the pop culture consciousness. And so and then Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers comes along, and it's met with not that great reviews, okay, from the critics, and it does okay at the box office because it's like, wow, this is but then the very next movie after that, at the very end of the decade, 89, is The Revenge of Michael Myers, which tanks critically and financially. So you can make the argument that although there were 3 Michael Myers Halloween movies released in the 1980s, you can make the argument that there were only 2 good ones, and you can even make the argument that there was really only 1 really good one.
Right.
So when you think of it that way, and then you think of all the Elm Street and Jason movies that were released in the 80s, Michael was non-existent. And Michael tried to sort of stay relevant in 1995 with The Curse of Michael Myers, but that didn't do much. The resurgence of Michael, when Michael officially took over in popularity between Freddy and Jason and Michael, was mostly thanks to Halloween H2O, because it's when, yes, it was released at a time capitalizing on the resurgence of that kind of horror in the late 90s. And Freddy and Jason were not around. So Michael saw an opportunity, so to speak, and then boom, it was Halloween H2O. Sadly, then there's Halloween, Resurrection, but that movie was so successful and entered the pop culture consciousness, and for many of our viewers, could very well be the first Halloween film they saw in the movie theater, if not the first Halloween movie they saw. So it definitely has that nostalgic effect. And that's why today Michael is more popular, but he was nowhere to be seen in the 1980s.
That's why
nowhere.
It's easy to see at these cons, and I see him, pop up on the Instagram feeds of I follow Halloween Movies officials, and they actually started following me back. So that's pretty cool. Shout out to them.
Yeah.
But I see them, and I see pictures of hundreds of Michael Myers at the cons now. And I'm just and we talked about this before, back, growing up as a kid, when I wore the mask, I was pretty much guaranteed the only one in a 50-mile radius probably going to be dressed as Michael Myers. Nobody was wearing it.
Yeah, it's
you
true.
would see a lot of kids wearing the hockey mask. You would see a lot of kids wearing the Freddy mask. The other thing I wanted to touch on, because we kind of mentioned it briefly here about the MTV, and I don't mean MTV in the sense of the channel, but I mean the sense of the metal music that was also a part of the Freddy and Friday the 13th franchise.
Right.
And that was a big marriage and a big part to that whole pop culture, like you were talking about in the 80s, that I kind of miss that, because with horror movies today, you don't have that element of music with the movies that you had back in the 80s. Now, granted, yeah, I mean, you know, Dream Warriors, whatever the hell, I think Dream Warriors is actually the name of the song.
Dream Warriors.
I mean, it's cheesy, but there's something really cool about it. And even Alice Cooper's, Man Behind the Mask?
Yeah.
You know, like, yeah, I mean, they're campy, they're cheesy metal tunes, but that, like, it was just all a part of that, of the lexicon of that decade, which made it so great.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know if that would necessarily work today because I think it's very specific to its identity for its time. I'll admit, and maybe it's because I'm not a huge music guy. I mean, I like music. Who doesn't like music? I just mean in terms of being a really passionate music fan. But I admit that when it comes to horror movies, I really love that. I love being able to watch a horror movie and feel the mood and the atmosphere within me. I love when horror movies begin with a certain feeling and a certain tone, and that really sort of mysterious kind of tone, depending on, you know, what the film is, and it ends that way as well. And I was never a big fan of horror movies beginning with rock music or alternative songs and ending that way as well, because whatever was going on, as soon as it would kick in, whatever song it was, whatever you were feeling right before that has been broken. So if you're feeling like this kind of like, wow, then all of a sudden it takes you out of it. At least it took me out of it. But it's definitely a reflection of that time. I mean, the late 80s is when MTV really began to take off. That's when you got your MTV Freddy. That's when you got your MTV Jason, you know, and so it's very, you know, it suits it does. But I'm sort of indifferent to it. I've never really been a fan of it, so I don't really care either way, but I mean, there's a specific reason why, because a lot of the times too, up and coming bands would sign deals to have their song play in a film, you know, and of course, because that would then put them on the map, and then it would help promote the movie. It would help promote sales of the soundtrack and help the band out as well. And, you know, there's a whole variety of things. There's a lot of that were at the time relatively unknown that had their songs being played on in these horror movies. I mean, I remember, I think the song Hush played at the end of I Know What You Did Last Summer. Yeah. So I guess they were still kind of doing it in the late 90s too.
They were. I just always felt like, I don't, maybe it's just because I'm a fanboy of the 80s. But I always felt like when at certain moments in the movie, whether they're, you know, there's a scene there in the Nightmare on Elm Street where they're in a diner sequence and you kind of faintly hear some music being played in the background, or if they're in a car sequence, you hear something playing on the radio. I always liked that because I really felt like I was a part of that decade. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
You know, you hear the sound of the music. You're like, yep, that's the fucking 80s, man. And that's what I always loved about it. Mixed in with like what, you know, the natural ambient sound effects that they did back in the day for horror movies and whatnot.
Sure.
All that tied in together, which is a big reason why I didn't like this Halloween film, you know, of the new one, 2018. Not because it didn't have music of it, but it just, when you add in how they used to make movies back in the day, whether it's the establishing shots of the town that we're in, or you add in that atmospheric music of the decade and whatnot, you feel like you're a part of this movie. And that's what these movies back in the day made me feel like, whereas movies today, unless we're talking like Conjuring stuff, now it's different. But when like a movie like 2018 Halloween came out, I didn't really feel connected like I felt connected with the Friday the 13th movies or the Nightmare on Elm Street movies of the 80s. When you watch that, you feel like you are a part of that decade because of how everything is put together within the story.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's definitely a different time. You know, and how they approach making those kinds of movies. A Nightmare on Elm Street, it's an interesting property because it's very rich with mythology and potential, and it's got its fans. It's got very hardcore fans of Freddy Krueger. There are many people that believe that nobody else could play Freddy Krueger other than Robert Englund. I think that's just fucking bullshit.
Yeah, I don't get
because
that.
because the fact of the matter is this: you have to differentiate between, you know, the emotional attachment you have for somebody and literally looking at the character and the part and making a bold statement like saying nobody could ever play Freddy Krueger the way Robert did is so naive and narrow-minded and just not true. Even Robert Englund himself has said that there is somebody else that can do it. And I know that he casually at one point mentioned that he thought Kevin Bacon, you know, would be a thing. And then, of course, everybody takes that as the gospel and thinks that Kevin Bacon should be Freddy Krueger. Kevin Bacon's 60 years old, for Christ's sakes. Okay. I mean, I don't think Kevin Bacon should be Freddy Krueger. I think they should go younger. They should go, look, when Robert Englund first donned the fedora, he was younger than us. Okay? He was like 35. So I don't think you should go 25, but I definitely think in and around our age, maybe a bit younger, is where you would like to start if your goal is long-term success potentially.
What about, I know England's mentioned a few times, and I agree with this, where he's talked about doing the prequels and getting into how Freddy became Freddy, and, you know, which is it's a very sensitive subject in the 2018 movie-going audience. If this were the 80s, I think you could get away with it. In 2018, I don't think you can get away with it.
Right.
It is a very sensitive subject, you know.
Well, it is. But I just want to finish my point before I capitalize on that. Is there is no doubt in my mind that there is another actor that can do justice to the character of Freddy Krueger. That doesn't mean that he's going to become your Freddy Krueger. That doesn't mean that. Harrison Ford will always be my Indiana Jones in the same ways that Sean Connery will always be somebody's James Bond. Daniel Craig will always be somebody's James Bond. This is a generational thing as opposed to more of a performance thing. There are many other classically trained actors like Robert Englund was, and even those that aren't, that can don that hat and do it justice. I think it should be somebody who's relatively unknown. And when I say unknown, that doesn't mean bad. No, people tend to correlate unknown with not good. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I don't want Kevin Bacon. I don't want a name that you already know. In 1984, when Robert Englund played Freddy Krueger, he was relatively unknown. He was a character actor that appeared in some movies and some TV shows, but he was never really a starring guy. He was always sort of the supporting guy. And it's not that you didn't recognize him at all, but if I had said the name to you, Robert Englund, in 1983, you'd have no idea who the fuck I was talking about.
No.
No idea who the fuck I was talking about.
Fan of V. You know?
Yeah, exactly. And you might go, oh, that guy.
Yeah.
You know, it wouldn't make any sense. Robert Englund himself has said, of course somebody else can play Freddy Krueger. It's bringing the essence and the spirit of what the character was to that character. You don't go into playing that role doing a Robert Englund impression of Freddy Krueger. You don't try to do what he did, but you bring the spirit and the essence of the character there. And I'm not talking about the 2010 film. I'm talking about, in a general sense, it absolutely can be done. That doesn't mean that this, but people tend to think, I don't like that you're pushing it on me. Robert Englund will always be my Freddy. Okay, well, Robert Englund will always be your Freddy. Okay, great.
Well, no,
but that doesn't mean that somebody else cannot bring justice to the character. It's like saying that Michael Keaton can only be Batman. Well, no, that's not true.
Right.
And that's been proven. And there were people, because of the of Batman Returns. Batman Forever and of Batman and Robin, who started to believe that there is only one man that could ever play Batman, and that was Michael Keaton. I remember this, okay, kids? I grew up in the 90s. I remember. I was a teenager in the 90s. I remember because of the lukewarm reviews of Batman Forever and the shit show that was Batman and Robin in 97. I remember because it wasn't Michael Keaton. And people have, no, it's not possible. It's not fucking possible. Not possible. Michael Keaton is forever Batman. It's not possible. Fuck that. No, don't bother. Don't ever make it again. And what ends up happening in 2005? Along comes Christian Bale. And then, no, it's Bale. It's Bale all the way. Bale all the fucking way. And then what ends up happening? Along comes Ben Affleck. And a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people a lot of people think that Ben Affleck's even better than Bale. So all I'm saying is that to adopt the mindset that nobody in the history of acting, in the history of major motion pictures ever again for all eternia could ever possibly do justice to the character of Freddy Krueger, it's just fucking mind-blowingly stupid.
No, I agree because, look, I mean, I might get shit for this, but I liked Henry Cavill portrayal of Superman.
Another good example. Yeah.
I thought he did great. You can say what you want about Justice League and Batman versus Superman, but I thought in Man of Steel, I thought he did a great job. What I liked about, like you said, he was an unknown. I didn't know who he was at the time, when the movie came out. And he didn't make me feel like I had to compare him to who I always identify as Superman, Christopher Reeve. Christopher Reeve will always be, that was my childhood, man. I mean, that's the first Superman I'm seeing on the fucking big screen. I'm like, holy shit balls, man. But Henry Cavill, I thought he embraced the role as Clark Kent Superman. I thought he did a great job with it. So I agree with you that there's not one defining Freddy Krueger. Yes, if you grew up in the 80s like we did, Robert Englund's always going to be, the one we're going to look at and revere as, this is our Freddy Krueger. But that's not to say someone else can't pick up the reins and say, okay, man, now it's my time to do it,
Right, because this is what you have to understand. If an actor goes into the role of Freddy Krueger with the intention and even the direction to play it like Robert Englund, do a Robert Englund Freddy Krueger impression, you will fail. You will fail because your audience is not stupid. You will fail because you are not Robert Englund. But what you need to do is you have to understand what the Freddy Krueger character is and which Freddy Krueger is this movie about. Is this Freddy's dead Freddy Krueger? Is this Freddy's revenge Freddy Krueger? Is this somewhere in the middle? It's Dream Warriors Freddy Krueger? Because those are three completely different interpretations of Freddy Krueger.
To me, the first one, I always like the original.
Right. Yeah. For sure.
Original, that's Freddy.
Yes. Yeah. And between 1 and 2, they're very similar.
Yes.
So let's say it's that. Okay. Well, you understand, what did Robert do? Look at the character, examine the character, talk to Robert, right? I mean, what's his face? Alden Ehrenreich, I think is the kid's name that played Han Solo. He had lunch with Harrison Ford and talked about the character and what the character's all about. And he didn't go into the Solo film doing a Harrison Ford Han Solo impression. He went into the Solo film bringing the spirit of the character to life, bringing the spirit. And you could look at him and go, yeah, I get it. Like, I see it. I see what he's doing. I see it. And for me, I can't speak for anybody else, but for me, I watched his performance as Han Solo and I thought, yeah, I buy that is a younger. I could totally buy if somebody said, could you believe that this was Han Solo 15 years before A New Hope? I'd go, yeah, I could totally buy that, because the essence and the flavor of the character was there. And that's what you have to do with any future Freddy Krueger. That doesn't mean you have to like it. That doesn't mean you have to accept it. But I'm telling you, as a trained actor, that is what you have to do. That would be the approach of how you would approach it. I would never, if somebody asked me to be Freddy Krueger, I would never, as much as you see me here going, ha, 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 and all that kind of stuff, that wouldn't be my mindset going in, because I'm having fun when I do that. And I'm clearly doing a Robert Englund sort of esque Freddy Krueger impression, but that might not be what is called for and what I need to do if I actually was called upon to be the real Freddy. It's a whole different ballgame.
Example of a movie that totally tanked when they tried to duplicate something that had already been done, and that is Superman Returns. When Brandon Roth played Superman there, this is now like early 2000s, during Smallville's peak, when everybody wanted Tom Welling to play Superman. They chose Brandon Roth to play him in Superman Returns, but his mannerisms and his body language, everything he did in that movie reminded you too much of Christopher Reeve, where it's like, I couldn't separate myself. I'm watching someone trying to copy Christopher Reeve's mannerisms and everything else, the looks and expressions. And this is why Superman Returns didn't do that well. And it's why people don't really look at that film as one of the better films of the Superman movies. Whereas when you look at Henry Cavill's performance, like you just said, you get that essence of Superman, but without having to do the comparisons of like, oh, he was too much like Christopher Reeve. No, Henry Cavill took it on and made it his own. Like it or not, he did. Whereas Brendan Roth in Superman Returns was way too fucking much like Christopher Reeve, and I couldn't separate the two. And that's what I didn't like about it.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. I just want to capitalize on something Grave Warmer said in the chat room, because he's absolutely right. So I guess it's a good mix of bringing the essence of the character, but also making it your own. That's exactly what it is. You have to make it your own. And the reason why you have to make it your own is because you want to put your own stamp on it. Look at all the James Bond characters. Now, Daniel Craig, to be fair, is a little different than the James Bond characters we got through Roger Moore, Sean Connery, Timothy Dalton, Pierce Brosnan. I mean, he's a bit different, okay? But if you look at what Pierce was doing in the James Bond role, and you look at Roger Moore, or you look at Sean Connery, you can tell that this is there's an essence, there's a flavor, there's a style to this character. And then Daniel Craig comes along and he brings that essence and that flavor and that swagger and that style there, but he makes it his own. And some people today, even Bond fans that have been Bond fans for years, say that he's one of the best that we've ever had.
Daniel Craig.
So yeah. So it's a combination of a few things. It's not easily achieved. Okay, but it definitely can be done. There is an actor out there that can definitely do justice to the character of Freddy Krueger that makes you leave the theater thinking to yourself, well, it wasn't Robert, but you know what? They did a really good job. And wow, what a performance they did. I felt like it was Freddy Krueger.
And
right?
how
you have to
do a good job. They go back to the original, the darkness of how the original was.
But something
campy or lighthearted and goofy jokes, and where the series ultimately progressed to, bring it back to that dark creepiness. And I think you're right. I think people will walk out of the theater like you just said. It's not Robert Englund, but damn, that was a good flick.
Well, because this is the question. If they were to reboot or remake A Nightmare on Elm Street, it probably won't be a direct sequel. So if it's not a direct sequel, your question should not be, is this person Robert Englund? Because it doesn't have to be, because it's not supposed to be, because it's not a sequel to any of the movies that Robert Englund did. What you have to ask yourself is, do I buy that this is Freddy Krueger? And if you can buy that it's Freddy Krueger, then they've won. You know what I mean? And that doesn't mean that it's going to be the same Freddy Krueger as Robert Englund. But if you can walk away, like we just said, going, wow, that dude was fucking, you know, what do the kids say today? Off the chain, you know? that's essentially like, you know, what it is. And so I don't want to spend a lot of time on that, but I do believe that there is somebody else out there that can do justice. And like I said, Robert Englund believes there's somebody else out there that can do I guarantee if you were to ask him, do you think anybody else could do Freddy Krueger like you? He'd say, of course. Somebody has to understand what I did and the character and what I brought, and they have to make it their own. But of course, right?
Now,
so anyway,
do we even go back to that well, or do you leave it alone? I was talking with my brother about this because he just watched Halloween 2018, and we both, very rarely do we agree on movies, and we both, on our reviews of Halloween, we both have the same, you know, agreements to it. But then we were talking like about, you know, horror movies and slasher, specifically slasher genre in general. Does this work now with the 2018 movie going audience? I mean, or should we leave it in the 80s where it belonged, where it had its time, you know, and whatnot? Because it just seems like we're in a different era now. Like we're into the psychological thrillers. We got Us coming out here, you know, in the next month or two. We had, you know, A Quiet Place and Hereditary last year. That seems to be now the trend of horror movies that are coming out. Does slasher movies fit today's movie-going audience, or do we need a break from it and come back to it maybe in another 10 years or so?
The short answer is,
I know it's a long answer, but question.
No. I was going to say the short answer is no, it doesn't. And the longer answer is this: we are not in the slasher craze right now. The reason why Halloween 2018 did very well commercially is not because it was a great Halloween movie. It did very well, and I'm not saying that it wasn't. If you thought it was phenomenal and totally awesome, you are more than entitled to feel that way. But that's not the reason it did well. The reason it did well was because this was the first Halloween movie we had had since 2009. It had the nostalgia of Jamie Lee Curtis, John Carpenter coming back, and Nick Castle. For the longest time, people thought that he was the shape in the entire movie. Okay. Right. So his name was floating around, and the video of him on the treadmill in that horrible Trick or Treat Studios mask or whatever it was.
Great marketing.
It was great marketing. So the nostalgia around the hype for this movie was huge. And knowing that it was a direct sequel, like an alternate Halloween 2, that was big. It was the first Halloween movie to have been released actually in the month of October since 1989's Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers.
That's crazy to think when you've had what? Curse, H2O,
Resurrection, and both Rob 5
movies. I think some of them were released in August, right?
Yes, both Rob Zombie films were the summer. Halloween H2O was the summer. Halloween Resurrection was the summer, and Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers was towards the end of September.
Hey, so Dave, I like to make a movie. I want to call it Halloween, but I like to release it in the summer while everybody's camping and having fun at the beach.
Right, exactly. So it was a brilliant move to release it in the month of October against Halloween, and it's been so long. This storyline has been so long. There's a new generation now that is taking interest. People want to go to the movie theater to watch a movie, and it's just called Halloween. Don't think at all that wasn't deliberate. Okay, it was beautiful marketing. Yes, their excuses were, well, we thought of this, we couldn't really think of something, we didn't know what to call it, so we just thought Halloween just fit. Yeah, and I'll tell you why it fit: because it's beautiful marketing. Because when you go to a theater and you see all you see is Halloween. You don't see Halloween Returns. You don't see Halloween Again. You don't see Halloween He's Back. You just see Halloween. And psychologically, it plays on that. It's singular. It's there. It's supposed to be there. It's you. Everybody can go see this. You don't have to see anything prior to this to get it. And you know what? In many ways, you didn't. So I don't want to go off on a tangent here about Halloween, but the reason why that movie did so well was not because it was a good movie. It was because of everything else that was riding on it. It was going to make $70 million opening weekend, whether it was good or not, because of the hype alone, right? Because box office results and quality are not mutually exclusive to each other. So, but I don't think this Halloween film, this story, has legs. I think if they were to make sequels, I think you would watch the box office drop huge, because I don't think anybody's really interested in the story. I think they were interested in the hype. And so I think because that's not, as you said, that's not the era of horror we're in. We're in the era of psychological horror, like Get Out, like Don't Breathe, like Us. Yes. You know, This is like Hereditary. This is sort of we're in this phase, and it will come and go. And that doesn't mean that the slasher genre won't come around again. But at this very moment, if they made a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, they know that movie would do well because of the nostalgia. It doesn't have to be good. Okay. They go out nobody goes out to make a movie that's bad. But what I'm saying is that you make an Elm Street film for $10 million, it's going to be huge. And if you were to have Robert Englund back, look out. You know, I mean, it's going to but that just means right. Because they're riding on the nostalgia of it. They're not necessarily making it because there's the demand for it. There was no demand for a Halloween film. Yes, through the fans. Maybe in the fans, but in the broader sort of horror genre and motion pictures, there was no demand for it. It's not like we need another one, no, not at all. There's no demand right now for an Elm
Elm
Street
Street.
movie or a Friday the 13th film. But certainly, if they were to make another one, I think the best thing they can do, I guess it depends what the end game is. I mean, if they get Robert Englund back and they do a band back together again, like they did Halloween 2018, okay. But then, as you know, we've talked about, and even Cody Leach said as well, what's your end game? So
Right.
are you going to
One-off.
because if you do an Elm Street with Robert Englund, okay, but what if it's so successful that you want to do a sequel, but Robert wants no part in it? So now you have to recast Freddy. So you're going to recast Freddy right in the middle when you've just had a movie with Freddy? Whoa, hang on a sec here. Maybe the best thing to do would be to start from scratch with a new Freddy, one that is awesome, as opposed to having Robert and then having to recast and pissing everybody off because Robert doesn't want to do it. And I'm not convinced that Robert wants to do it. I'm really not. He had a great time on the Goldbergs. He had a lot of fun, and he happened to be doing some press for the Goldbergs, and he said that he might have one more left in him. But that wasn't him saying, yes, I want to do it. It was him having a good time on the Goldbergs. There was a lot of nostalgia there. He felt really, excited about it. But I've always said, ask him again a year from now, and he might even say, nah, once the Goldberg thing has died down and, all that, it wasn't an endorsement that he wants to do it. It just, he was riding high off this little fun experience he had for shooting for a day as Freddy Krueger. But does he actually want to get into the makeup every day at 2 and 3 in the morning and wear that shit every day for 6 weeks straight at 72 years old or 73 years old? Probably not. He might have a Goldberg episode in him, but does he have a 90-minute major motion picture in him? That's a whole different story. So I think we've seen our last as Robert, as Freddy, as him as Freddy. And if they do do it, I think they will cast somebody else. I think that's probably smart.
Well, and another thing too, to piggyback off what we were talking about, does the slasher genre still work today in that formula? There's a lot of elements to that formula that when you look back and you watch those films, whether it's Friday or Nightmare on Elm Street, you got the big-breasted women who are going to eventually at some point get topless in the movie. You're not going to see that shit as much anymore in today's movie-going audience. The dumb jocks, the typical 80s stereotype roles that you would cast for these, for these movies. You're not seeing it in the story arcs of these characters anymore, which is what I think there's the reason why that those movies back in the 80s have a sense of charm to them that you're not getting with some of the slasher films that come out today that don't have that charm that you had back in the 80s. And I think that's a big part in the PC culture that we live in today, that they're not doing things the way they used to do and how they used to get away with stuff. That's why, when we were talking about this with my brother and what I was asking you about, do I think, slasher films work today? Yes, but you're going to have to come up with a new formula because of what we did in the 80s. That shit's just not going to fly with today's movie going audience because you're going to offend probably more than half your audience. That's partially, I think, why, mixed in with some other reasons, why the 2009 Friday the 13th film didn't get great reviews, because again, we're in a different time, man. Had that movie come out in the 80s, I think it would have been fine. But it came out in 2009. It got the critics, destroyed it. I mean, there's a lot of other reasons why, but I think the formula that they were trying to do in the 2009 remake, they were really trying to still capitalize and do that 80s platform of storytelling and story arcs with characters that just doesn't fit with the modern movie-going audience.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a really good point. And it's tricky because there's somebody in the chat room here. I just quickly saw, who was it? It was Michael Anderson said, do a one-off with Robert as Freddy and end it. Why? Freddy is already ended in Freddy's Dead. It was a shitty movie, but he's already dead. So why do it? Well, because for the nostalgia, because I want to see him as Freddy again. Who gives a fuck? I don't care. I like it's why it's just doesn't, do a one-off with Robert and end it just so I can see him as Freddy again. Why? Who cares? It's just not something that I really want to see. I don't want to see Robert's gained a little weight. I mean, granted, he'll be in makeup and he probably could still do it, but I just think it's I don't think that's what I don't think that's what the goal would be. And maybe it would be. Maybe it is to just do a one-off. And maybe they could do a one-off and just end it. But then end it. They've already ended it. So how are they going to end it again? Well, maybe they can correct some wrongs. Maybe they'll do a direct sequel to the original instead, or a direct sequel to a Nightmare on Elm Street 3 and pretend that 6 and 5 and 4 and 2 never happened. And then it's like, oh man, it can be really difficult, to find the right pattern. I think that really, I think they're the best thing to do. And it's not that I'm coming down on you, Mike. I do understand what you're saying, but I agree. It's why reboot it at all? Why did we need this Halloween film? I am not convinced, even though I think that it's likely they may do a Halloween sequel. I will tell you guys right here, I'm not fully convinced they're going to. I'm not fully convinced they're going to. They probably will. If I was betting, I would say there's a 70% chance that they probably will. But it would not surprise me if we never saw another Halloween, a Halloween sequel to this movie. It wouldn't surprise me.
I'm okay with that.
They're saying all the right things. Oh, we're trying to figure it out. We're working on it. I don't know. I'm not convinced of that yet. Not convinced of that yet, but that's a whole other thing, But yeah, I don't know. I mean, what direction would you want them to go in if they were to do another Elm Street film?
I have mixed feelings on a one-off. I do. There's a part of me that's like, yeah, for the fun of it, it'd be cool to see. Look, I'm a firm believer that, you're never too old to do anything. If you feel like you got something left in the tank, go and do it. Stallone proved that with Rocky Balboa, came back and delivered us a phenomenal film, arguably, a lot of people's favorite sequel to the original Rocky film. Just depends on who you talk to. And so, yeah, and you could use that metaphor that he uses in that movie, that, you got stuff in the tank still in the basement that you need to let out. So, yeah, if Robert Englund and Heather Langenkamp feel like, hey, you know what, we've got one more in us, I wasn't totally happy with the way 3 ended, or whatever.
Right.
I'm not totally opposed to the idea of them saying, look, and making it clear, like, hey, guys, we're not signing up to do a bunch of fucking sequels here. Like, but we're going to give you everything we fucking got left in the tank. And people do have to realize, like, you hit something here. And I'm not body shaming Robert Englund, but you're not going to get the lean, sleek, Freddy that you saw back in 91 when he was in Freddy's Dead. And even Jason versus Freddy. Like you said, he's heavier now. He's older. It's just fucking, it's life. It just happens to all of us. We get older and you get heavier. It's just the way fucking life works. So fans would have to prepare themselves for that you're not going to get the Robert Englund Nightmare of Freddy Krueger of even Jason versus Freddy. You're going to get a different look to it. And I'm not saying that would, totally affect the fans, point of view or, how they're, perceiving Freddy on screen, but it will be talked about. It would be mentioned that, when you're looking at like, well, geez, like he put on a few pounds, hasn't he? Because this is going to happen. You're going to have critics out there to say that. Langenkamp, I don't know what she's been doing for the last 30 years, since she did Nightmare on Elm Street, or actually Wes Craven's new Nightmare. I don't follow her career, so I don't know. But that's not to say, hey, if there's a good story there to tell, and we're not just going to fucking throw some shit together, and we're not going to do a greatest hits, like Halloween 2018 did, and rip off scenes from, different parts of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, but a fresh, original new story, I'm okay with it. But like you said, Cody even said this as well too. What is the end game? If the end game was, okay, we're doing this, but this is just a one and done film, then how much time do you let go by before you reboot the series again and go into a whole new direction? Because that's ultimately what you're going to have to do.
Well, and look, look, you can say you want a one-off, but people generally say that, oh, no, he can just come back, he can just do one and, wrap it up. But yes, you say that because you want the movie to happen. But then if the movie happens and it's successful, look at all the people right now that said, no, just, Laurie Strode, come back, just have this Halloween and, just have this one, just one. And now a lot of people liked it. And now what are they saying? Oh, there's going to be a sequel. Oh my God, James Courtney's the best Michael Myers ever had. Yeah, and now they want to go on and on and on. And you know what I've said about sequels? I've said it ad nauseum on this channel. I've said that it's inevitable that the more sequels you make, you will be right back to where you were. So they might be able to make a decent sequel to this new Halloween film, maybe. But at the end of the day, they're fooling themselves, and you're fooling yourself if you think that they're going to start a string of sequels and there's not going to be any fucking shit shows in there, and we're not going to be right back to where we were.
Years old, wanting to play Freddy Krueger at 80. Come on.
No, so I agree with you that listen, if there's a story there and Heather Langenkamp wants to come back and Robert does want to come back, okay, great. But what if it's hugely successful and Robert has no desire to return? Well, now you're at, okay, do we just reboot it again? So you've just made this pretty cool, awesome, successful little Elm Street film with Robert and Heather, and then Robert has a heart attack and he's gone, or he just doesn't want to do it. He's just like, no, I don't want to do it. I had a rough time on that film. I did it. I managed to get through it. And I lost some weight and I was in it, whatever, but I just have no desire to do it.
Sure.
Well, then what? Then it's like, well, I guess we just leave it, but damn this, what do you just reboot it without him and then, or you make a sequel, but it's not him, and then you have to explain all that. So I just think the safest thing to do is to cast smart, is to have a great story that is really great, really solid, and you cast smart and you recast Robert Englund. That's what I think. But you give it to a production company like A24, somebody that can tap it, because a new Nightmare on Elm Street needs to be it has to go back to the roots of the original film. It has to be dark and very scary and very surreal. The one thing that I loved, and I've mentioned this before, and you've heard me say this, the one thing that I absolutely loved about that original Elm Street in terms of the dream sequences is that the dream sequences felt very much, ironically, grounded in reality. They felt like dreams that you would actually have, or daydreams that you would have. There were no sensational sets or no sensational dream sequences that were just over the top and it was wild and crazy, like in part 4 where the girls got the cockroach arms. I think that was 4, maybe it was 5. Sorry?
No, you're right. Wes Craven did it,
well,
at its best.
Right. It felt real. The dreams that Nancy would have, and that Tina had, going out into the alleyway, and, it's just in an alleyway, and then of course she gets murdered in her bedroom, but it's her bedroom. It's what's happening in there that is so wild and crazy, and one of the most iconic horror kills in the history of horror. But it's not an overly sensational dream sequence in the terms of its set or its presentation or whatever the case is, and it made you feel more emotionally attached to the dream. It made you feel like this could actually happen, that I could have a dream like this. It felt real. Whereas when we got into sort of the carnival-y, poppy, eye candy dreams of the later films, I can't relate to that. Like Freddy's playing a video game, ooh, cool graphics. It's just like, what is this shit? It doesn't make any sense. So you got to go back to that. You got to go back to the dark. Play it like Shakespeare. And whenever you hear me say that, I mean just play it straight. Play it serious. Play it like A Nightmare on Elm Street is a very serious psychological horror film with a slasher element to it, obviously, but it's fucking scary. I mean,
what could be done, and it is possible, because the one that the redheaded stepchild of the bunch that doesn't get often talked about a lot, that I actually like, and it's one of my favorite sequels in the franchise, is next to Dream Warriors, is Wes Craven's New Nightmare. That was one-off, and that was and very ahead of its time. They weren't doing movies like that, setting it almost in like a real world type setting, which is what he did for that movie. And I really liked it. I know back in the early 90s when it came out?
1994.
Yeah. So when it came out in 94, it wasn't exactly well received by the fans.
It was not.
I loved it. I thought it was a great concept, a great idea. And it's still one of my favorite Nightmare on Elm Street movies to this day. So they could do a one-off. I'm not saying they have to do something like Wes Craven's New Nightmare, but it can be something in that tone. You know what I mean? So it is possible to do a one-off and be successful with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But that's where I would go. Like if I was in the writing room and somebody said to me, Dave, what do you think is the direction we should go with this film? I would say this is the direction you need to go. If we're rebooting the whole film and you're doing it from scratch, and this is a Nightmare on Elm Street Part 1, as if all, the others didn't happen, it's a remake. This is the direction you need to go. And this is a nightmare on Elm Street. This isn't a fluffy dream on Elm Street. So it has to be, but it has to be grounded. The dreams have to be realistic, a dream that we would have, so you can connect to the audience, and the audience can become attached to these characters. So they're not, I mean, in some of the later films, Freddy was not even the star of the movie. It's the set pieces and the dream sequences that were the star. And then Freddy happens to show up at the end, But I mean, really, at the end of the day, he wasn't even. Who gives a fuck if he's even? The dreams are so surreal and weird, which is cool. Don't get me wrong, but they weren't scary. It was just his movies began to become almost like like fun house, haunted house things at theme parks that you walk through at your local fall fair. Like that's what it started to become, and he just happens to be the carnival barker at the end of at the end. Oh, did you have a good time, bitch? And it's just like, and so that's kind of what the Elm Street films became. And I much prefer the darker, more cerebral side to Freddy that was very intense. And I think that's where you need to go is into that real dark area.
We were beginning to touch base on that. I totally agree. I think, look, get away from the one-liners, get away from the jokes, bring it back to what the original was and just how dark it was. I mean, look, if you even want to get into, his past and the things that he did with little kids and shit like that.
Right.
Again, with 2019's movie going audience, I don't know how that is going to be perceived. That's my only concern. We can go very dark with it. I'm on board with it 100%. But today's modern movie-going audience, I really don't see them signing up for that. I'm not saying the dark side of it, but getting really tackled into Freddy's past and the shit that he did. I don't see that happening.
Yeah, that I don't think that's necessary either. I think, and the reason why I bring up a studio like A24 is not because I think A24 has to do it, but there was this, when I was at the Halloween convention in Pasadena, I was talking to a bunch of people there, and there was a bunch of, fans and filmmakers and the like. And of course there were rumors going around that, now that Blumhouse has Halloween, maybe they should get Friday, maybe they should get Elm Street, maybe they should get Scream, maybe they should get, and I don't want Blumhouse to monopolize everything. Now, it's not like it's Blumhouse only. They work with Universal and they have a partnership with them. But there's a visual style and there's a certain sequence of events and they tend to hire certain directors. It's not like they're not successful. What they do very well, and they have great success. And sometimes they have hits and they have misses, like every studio does.
Sure.
But A24 feels smaller because it is. They tend to tackle films with more of a cerebral sort of psychological angle, which they do. Doesn't mean they're always successful, because they're not. But with something like Elm Street, I think I don't necessarily want Blumhouse to monopolize all of the horror properties. I think it would be good to have some competition. It would be good for a studio like A24 who specializes in a little sort of smaller, moodier, more cerebral, more of an Elm Street kind of thing. I think A24 might be able to deliver more of the Elm Street that I think we need. Blumhouse can deliver more of the popcorn Elm Street. And that doesn't mean that it wouldn't have a psychological component to it, but it would feel bigger, you know, and Elm Street, the very first Elm Street was not, you know, it was a low budget film. It was a smaller film. It was smaller in its feel and its size. It was very claustrophobic. And I think that's where it needs to be. And I would be, let's just say that if I heard that Blumhouse got Elm Street, it's like, okay, are they going to deliver something that's visually satisfying? Of course. Are they going to be, you know, you're like, you know, you're going to get all the popcorn stuff that you want with a Freddy movie. And that's not to say that it wouldn't be good. Maybe it would be. But I would be more excited if I heard that A24 was looking at getting Elm Street. Because I'd be thinking, Now, the only thing that I'd be concerned about is that is A24 ready to make the leap into the blood, guts, and gore? Because you have to have that. You have to have the psychological component to Elm Street, but you also have to deliver on the slasher part of what Elm Street is. And if they are prepared to do that, I'd be interested. I would entertain that idea. I just don't know how I feel about Blumhouse monopolizing everything. I'm just not, I just don't know how I feel about that. But
I agree. I'm with you, man. A24 is one of my favorite studios out there. Obviously, they did Hereditary. A little bit, you know, a little blood there at the end of the film. Kind of shocking.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true. That's a good point.
Kind of shocked me for an A24 film. So, look, at the end of the day, like you just said, you know, whether it's Blumhouse, A24, whoever is doing it, we're all going to line up and go see the movie. That there, you know, there's no doubt about that.
For sure. I just hope that we don't need an Elm Street film. And if you are going to do one, I think you need to, unless you just want to get all these properties and give them all their swan song send off. Okay, we made Halloween great. Let's do Elm Street swan song. We'll get Robert back, Heather back, and it'll be directed by one of Wes Craven's kids, you know, or something. I don't know if he has kids. I think he does. You know, all right, great. You know, okay, let's get Friday the 13th. All right, we'll sort all that shit show out with the rights and everything, and everybody's all happy and they're hugging and they're making out and they're kissing babies and everything's great. All right, okay, I got it. Okay, we'll get Sean S. Cunningham back, and we'll get the girl that played, you know, Alice or whatever her name was in the first movie. You know, yeah, you know, we'll get her back. And
I tell you what, now with Friday the 13th, there is an exception. I would be okay, and I would like to see a sequel starring Amy Steele. Now she's from part 2. She's the Jeannie from part 2. Mm-hmm. She's my favorite Friday girl. She's a fan favorite for a lot of Friday the 13th fans. I would not have a problem with, and she still looks great to this day. I wouldn't mind seeing them doing a piggyback off of part 2. Maybe even, you know, I understand the hockey mask is the iconic marketing piece to the franchise, but maybe not going down that road, you know, picking up from where the events of part 2 left off and going, you know, continuing on with Jeannie's story. I would be okay with that. That's a Friday the 13th film that I would want to see as far as a sequel.
If people want to know more about Tony and I's Friday the 13th idea about rebooting the Friday the 13th franchise and where to go, I think it was episode 2 or 3 of Two Dudes and Some Bullshit. You can go onto my channel and go back and watch that episode. We go in depth about our idea for what could be done with Friday the 13th. But Elm Street, yeah, I mean, it's a property that will no doubt be remade again for sure, because you can introduce something like that to a new generation, and obviously we all dream. But I think it's got to be done in a very specific way. You want to scare people, you know, and nothing scares you more. It's not that you don't show anything. Okay. There is a certain identity to Freddy and, you know, whatnot, but go back to the roots of that first movie. That's what was scary. He wasn't scary in 6 or 5 or 4, and not even really in 3. You know, right. 3 is that I have mixed feelings about 3. I have a love-hate relationship with it. There's things about it I really like, and there's things about it I don't like. My favorites are 1 and 2. and
thing that I
certainly
wonder if we
the first
agree
one.
on three with, because we tend to be on board with some with our tastes in the way we think with movies. The one thing that I really hated about Nightmare, and I like Dream Warriors. I'm with you. Like, it's that love-hate relationship with Dream Warriors. There's a lot of great things I can say about it. Nancy's fucking death was just, it was so cheap. It really was. Like, here's one of the, big, if you want to call them now, iconic characters of this franchise. And I just felt like her showdown with Freddy should have been more climactic. It was very anticlimactic.
Yeah, I guess it was. I think my issue with Elm Street just has everything to do, like, I like the idea of the lucid dreaming and the kids and the dream warriors and Freddy and whatnot, and there was some good moments in there. I think I just didn't find it really scary. And when you come off, like, say what you want about, and I know that Elm Street 2 is the black sheep of the family, but it's a scary movie. Freddy is fucking scary in that movie. And I know that the whole gay undertone to the film and things like that, some people kind of like that. They get it.
The documentary. I had no clue there was a gay undertone to the movie.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's very apparent, but yeah.
Documentary, I'm like, oh, okay, now that makes fucking sense.
But Freddy and the movie itself is a scary film, and the presentation of him is scary. And in Elm Street 3, it felt very, I mean, it was fine. It had its moments, but that was the beginning, the beginning of the transition between Scary Freddy and Funny Freddy. You know what I mean? Hey, Jennifer, it's your big break. Welcome to prime time, bitch. And this, I mean, it was the beginning of that, and people love that, and they think it's great.
Again, you have to remember, you have to go with the times. It was the 80s, and that's what they were going with. And would a movie like that do well today? Of course not. Absolutely.
Well, and also you have to remember too that there was a year off where we didn't have a Freddy movie. So you had the first Elm Street in 84, the second in 85. There was no Elm Street film in 86. And then Dream Warriors came out in 87. And it was the late 80s where the MTV sort of culture and vibe really started to take off, 86, 87, 88. So Freddy changed, and it no longer became, I heard an interview with Robert Patton, of course, who plays Jesse in Elm Street 2. And so I cannot take credit for this as much as I would love to, because I think it's a great insight. But you got to give credit where credit is due. And he said this, and he's absolutely right. The first two Elm Street films were not about Freddy Krueger. The first two Elm Street films were about, you have Nancy and her friends and the relationship between them and how they're struggling against this antagonist, but it's about them. The second film is about Jesse and Lisa and about their relationship and what he's going through. And it's not about Freddy. I mean, Freddy is there, yes, but it's not about him. It's about what these kids are dealing with. When you get to Elm Street 3 and Elm Street 4, it becomes very much about Freddy Krueger and very much about him toying with people and the things that he's doing. And he becomes the star and the center sort of the thing, and the wisecracking. And I think Elm Street 5 was the one where the girl's having the dream where she eats herself to death or something. And he's there at the table in a tuxedo going, "Ah, come on." It's just like, what? It becomes about him. He's a carnival barker.
Sure.
But the very first two films are very much about the struggles and the relationships that these two characters are going through. And you have him there. You have to have him there. But he's there in the ways of a boogeyman. He's there sort of lurking. There's a presence there about him. But he doesn't always have to be on screen to feel him. And he's a dark sort of presence there.
We're not bashing on the sequels. They all have their place. And again, it's their time. So if you're a fan of 4 or 5 or Freddy's Dead, fucking awesome. Like, I don't want anyone to think that we're sandbagging.
But I'm not gonna look. I think Elm Street 6 is a fucking shit show, and I think 5 for the most part is a shit show, and I think 4 there's some redeeming qualities, and 3 is I think the best Elm Street movies are 1 to 3.
Yeah.
And then 4 is when you really start the MTV Freddy. And then 5 is just like one sensational dream sequence set after another. And then 6, well, we all know 6. But you're right. If you love those films, there's nothing wrong with that, and that's great. If you find some enjoyment out of that, that's great. But certainly the later films became more about Freddy. And the first two movies were more about the characters, and you have to be emotionally attached to these characters to really care about them dying. And I wasn't really emotionally attached to anybody in Freddy's Dead or Part 5 or Part 4.
To be honest, the only character I've ever been emotionally attached to in any of the Nightmare on Elm Streets is Nancy. I mean, really, is Nancy.
Right. And one of the big mistakes they made in Elm Street 4 from 3 was you had, look, despite the fact that I have mixed feelings about 3, Part 3 was very successful, and it's a fan favorite. But the mistake you made is that when you go into Part 4, you basically kill off everybody that people are emotionally attached to and love. So now you have this new character, Alice, who nobody knows anything about. Nobody gives a fuck about. She's kind of cute, but who cares really at the end of the day, you know, because I'm emotionally attached to Kincaid and
Kristen.
Yeah, right. Because of this fun movie that I just watched. And now you get rid of them so early on. And then we go into 5, and then Allison is not even in 6. And these new characters we don't know anything about. And you got Roseanne Barr in there and Tom Arnold. And I mean, there was never this continuity of this people that we can get attached to, you know, and horror movies falter at that. They can falter at that big time because they're slasher movies have shelf lives, really. I mean, some more than others. Okay. Certainly you can milk a certain properties more, but yeah, I just think you got to go back to the roots. You know, you hear me say that a lot, but I think if you want an Elm Street to be successful, you got to go, because one of the things that I heard Robert Englund say, so I can't take credit for this either, but it's an insight that I do agree with, when he was talking about the 2010 remake with Jackie Earle Haley, was that one of the mistakes they made was that you were already thrust right into these kids being very emo and going through these dreams.
Right.
You never had a chance to really sort of see the transition, to see them happy and laughing and sharing some laughs and watch that transition and go on that emotional journey together. You never saw that. And it was just, we were just thrust right into Nancy, played by Rooney Mara, you know, she's already depressed and going through shit and, you know, having these dreams. Like we're just sort of like, we're not connected to this. We're not one of them. Whereas Wes Craven's Nightmare on Elm Street from 1984, although it's very quick because it's not a long movie, there's a little bit of that character development at the beginning of the movie because we see the group together at a sleepover laughing. And there's that thing where Glenn's trying to call his parents and he's got the ghetto blaster trying to pretend that he's sleeping over at his buddy's place when he's really not, or he's got the thing goes wrong. And we see this just little bit of this camaraderie. We see joy and we see that they're okay. Yep. But then of course it makes a bit of a turn. And we cared about these characters. You have to care about your protagonist or protagonists. You have to.
We've talked about that in a few of our streams now. You know, whether it's Halloween or Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street. The key thing that made all 3 of these movies, I think, very successful is, again, the story arc of their characters, being invested into the characters, you know, wanting to protect Laurie Strode from the boogeyman,
right?
But also getting the feel and sense that you are in this small Midwest town. Same thing, Friday the 13th. You know, when you watch Friday the 13th, you feel like you're at this summer camp on the lake. You're part of that environment. Same thing with Nightmare on Elm Street. You're part of these kids in the small town that are going through some, you know, fucked up shit. So yeah, you're totally right. Having that element in that type of atmosphere of you know, that's the settings and the place and the shit that's going on, and the investment that you have as the, you know, movie watcher to these characters is so key and so critical. And as the series progressed, it was just, you know, even Friday the 13th films, it was just line them up, slash them up, and that's it. Move on to the next. That became the formula.
Right. Sorry, I'm just lost my train of thought here. I was looking at something online about Elm Street. Sorry. I feel like we should have somebody say, keep going, keep talking.
No,
but you're absolutely right, though.
Someone mentioned a few comments back up, and I'm paraphrasing it because I can't find the comment now. And sorry for misquoting, but someone did mention about how you can't make the movies the way they made them back in the day because, you know, what we mentioned this before, because today's movie going audience just won't accept it. Someone even mentioned that in the comment section as well too. And I'm sorry, I can't find it right now. So if you said it, go ahead and say it again, because I know someone said it here, you know, several comments up within me and Dave got a little sidetracked. But yeah, I totally agree with that. You know, that you cannot duplicate, you just can't duplicate, you know, the magic of what you had in the 80s. And sometimes I think it's better to leave well enough alone. And that's what, again, you know, not to repeat myself, but that's what me and my brother were talking about, is that, you know, should they even bother, you know, making these movies anymore, whether it's Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street or Halloween, or do these movies belong in their place in their moment of cinema history? And, you know, it's time to move on to new things.
Right. And that's something to keep in mind too, is that it's important to, you don't want to beat a dead horse, you know, and which is why when I looked at the Halloween 2018 movie, and I am still, for those of you wondering, you will still get my more fleshed out concept idea for a Halloween sequel. Don't worry about it. It is coming. It just takes a while, but it is coming. But I've always said that don't misinterpret my video about me talking about the potential of a sequel and what they could do as an endorsement for a Halloween sequel to 2018's film, because I don't think they need to make one, because I just don't know where you go, you know, and it's just one of those things where it doesn't need a sequel, really, and I don't want to get too far off track here because I want to stick to Elm Street, but really, and I understand why they didn't, but I wish they had the balls to do it, because a great ending to 2018's Halloween would have been Laurie Strode sacrificing herself to save her daughter and her granddaughter by and both her and Michael Myers die in the fire. She tackles Michael, somehow has him restrained somehow, and it's get out, run, get out, you know, and she goes down with the ship. The captain goes down with the ship and takes Michael with her. That would have been, and they both die together. I wish they had the balls to do it. I understand why they didn't do it, but I wish they could have pulled that trigger, because I would have had the utmost, I would have had major respect. I would have thought, wow, props, major respect, you know, but no, they want to leave a little bit of wiggle room in case they want to make a sequel. And it's like, a sequel to what? A sequel to what? You know? Anyway, but you're right. You're right with what you're saying. I mean, it comes down to the point where they will remake Elm Street again. I just hope that they go back to the roots and they make a really smart, scary Elm Street, because that's what they need to do. This is Nightmare, people. This is Nightmare. And I think Elm Street, this is basically what I'm trying to say. I think an Elm Street movie would work really well if it did not have the Hollywood polish and sheen to it. Sure. If it didn't have that Hollywood polish, you know, if it looked more like a grittier independent film, that gets me excited. That gets me excited. I don't want it to look too Hollywood and polished and pristine. You know, everybody is drop dead gorgeous, and, you know, it's so cookie cutter, and it's like, nah, let's mix it up a bit. But, you know, we'll see what happens. They'll remake it. There's no word. And for people saying that, oh, they were talking about, you know, they're going to do it. No, it's just that they would like to do it again. They would like to do it again, but there's nothing in show.
9% of these stories that you see online and whatnot, it's just it's a lot of it's clickbait stuff. A lot of it's just to get fans talking, people talking. You know, I shared that story with you the other day on Friday the 13th, and Blumhouse and the producers of it trying to, you know, pick up the rights. And, well, no, they're not trying to pick up the rights. They were asked, you know, would they like it? Of course they would. Of course they would like to get the rights to Friday the 13th and whatnot, and do a Friday the 13th film. But again, is it needed? That's really the question. Or should we be evolving as creators and coming up with new iconic horror villains. I mean, why do we have to keep going back to the well with Freddy,
I
Michael,
agree.
Jason? You know, like, look, Freddy, Michael, and Jason, you know, I love them. I mean, they're the best. They're, you know, they're the Mount Rushmores of the horror, you know, faces of horror in the slasher genre.
Yeah,
But
they're on there for sure.
why are we not, you know, I mean, since when was the last time we had a new iconic now horror slasher villain? Is it,
Well, you could probably go to the Hatchet movies, but those are B movies.
That's
Okay.
I'm talking iconic main.
No, I know what you mean. Yeah, and you probably would have to go all the way back to Ghostface, but that's primarily because the landscape of horror has changed. So they're not dishing out, you know, those kinds of movies anymore.
Right.
And so, you know, it's sort of, you know, it's not really there. I mean, it's not yeah, it's just the landscape of horror has changed. So I think.
But we stopped. Why did we stop creating? Why did we stop coming up with, you know, new iconic horror character? I think we need to get back to that. You know, I can't believe the well is totally dried up.
Well, it's because the landscape has changed, because we're not in that slasher sort of genre where we have that one figure or that one individual that is your main antagonist. Now we're more in the psychological aspect of horror with your psychological films, and which I quite like, because nothing will scare you more than what you picture in your own mind. So we're sort of in that realm, and we were in the 2000s. We were in the paranormal ghost sort of phase, and now we're moving into this. Now we've been in the psychological phase for the last 4 or 5 years, and we'll probably be there for a little bit longer. And the slasher genre will come around again. What's old is often new again, and it will come around, but I don't know. And then that's when you begin to capitalize on something new, a new figure that nobody has seen. But at the same time, there's only so much that one figure can look like or be, or there's only there's only so many weapons that, you know, the figure can use, or so many masks that the person can wear, without you automatically comparing it to, it just looks like Jason. It's totally like Michael. It's totally like Freddy. You know, so it's kind of like you're always going to be comparing it to what's come before it. You know, I mean, if you have this killer in the woods with a machete, oh, it's fucking Jason. You know, or you have this killer that I don't know, he wears a mask and stalks you. Some other there will always be comparisons to things that come before. So to come up with somebody new, some new individual that's like a man or like a figure that we haven't seen before, without going the magic route, and he starts fucking shooting lasers out of his, you know, I mean, I don't know. You put a knife in the hand with somebody with a mask, and you're going to get Myers and Jason comparisons. I mean, it's just the way it is, you know? So I don't know. I mean, I don't really,
You know what they need to do? They need to do something almost like, you almost have to do something like the original Friday the 13th, where you don't know who the killer is until the end of the reveal at the end of the movie, like a shocking reveal that you think it's somebody, you think it's this person, and then you have that surprising reveal. I think that's where you could possibly get away with it. But then, of course, at that point, the after effects is, yes, you'll have that, you know, comparisons like, oh, they tried to copy Friday the 13th, or, oh, you know, they're trying to do Halloween or Nightmare on Elm Street. I just hope that eventually with horror flicks, we get back into that, because I do miss it. I do miss that period, you know, because it was a lot of fun. You know, we were talking about this at the beginning of the stream, you know, with the music of that decade being influenced into these movies, or integrated, not influenced, but integrated into these movies. You know, it was fun. It was such a fun time. Will we ever get back to that? Probably not, because it's just a totally fucking different world now. But we have it. We always can go back to it. We can always go back and watch it, which is great. You know, so, but yeah.
I agree. I totally agree. Hey, you want to go over to the chat room?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right, let's go to the chat room. Let's open up the chat. Okay, well, actually, first, let me answer this because this was a super chat that came in
the super chat.
earlier on. I told people to hold off on your super chats until we go to the chat room. This is Tom Ferreira. Sorry, Tom. Do you think Michael enjoys killing people? Yes.
No. Absolutely.
There you go. Yes. No. All right. Next. Yes, I do. I mean, I think he's enjoys it. I don't know if he relishes in it because of the kind of character he is, but I think he's very methodical. It's almost like it's instinctual, right? Like he's a great white shark. It's just what he does. I don't think he thinks too much about it. It just feels instinctual to him to do it. I don't think he's relishing in it, but that's that. So yeah, let's get some questions going. All right. Let's see here.
What do you think of Robert directing Elm Street? Loggerhead. Loggerhead is the person's name. I'm not saying I wasn't calling you Loggerhead, Dave.
Okay, no.
Loggerhead so wrong.
What
Loggerhead asked, "What do you think of Robert directing that blooper?" That goes on the blooper reel for the end of the year.
Robert Englund?
Sure. Why not?
Does he mean Robert Englund?
I'm guessing that's what he means. Yeah, Robert Englund directed.
Well, Robert Englund, let me see here. Well, it's long. Director. He has 3 director credits according to IMDb. He directed looks like a short. No, it's a full-length film. In 2008 called Killer Pad. That's interesting. I like to see that. I don't think he's the right guy for it. No, it's not to say that he couldn't do it, but I don't think he's the right guy for it. I think, I mean, he might be able to act as a consultant maybe, but I don't think you have to have Robert Englund attached to the project. Just like you didn't have to have Nick Castle in that cameo. Right. Really, you know, I mean, like you don't have to, I don't think he needs to be there at all. I think it's nice if he is great, but I don't think he has to be there. So. Grave Warmer says, Dave, Tony, what do you guys think of someone like Matthew Lillard to play Freddy?
He's kind of an unknown. He's not super known unless you know the Scream franchise and Scooby-Doo. And what else did he do? He was Shaggy in Scooby-Doo. I know that, right?
Yes, he was.
It's
possible. I think he might be a little too tall for the role, but
true too.
And he's 49, 50. I think he's in his 50s now.
We want somebody, what, mid-30s?
Yeah, I think so. I think that would be a good sort of starting point. Older than the teenagers, but not 50 or 60. Super chat again. Thanks, Tom. Tom Sabers, if you were to kill Michael, how would you do it? Honestly, I would sacrifice myself and go down with him in a fire. There we go.
My favorite Michael ending kill scene when they're getting him is Halloween 4, and when they're just shooting him up and then he goes down into the whatever it's like, been
the well or the grave
or mine shaft. I really did think that was a proper bookend. Call it a day. I love, the line that, rest in peace, Donald Pleasance says, Michael is where he belongs, in hell, at the end of the scene there. The twist that you don't see coming with Daniel Harris's character, I still think is one of my favorite twists in a movie. Like when you talk about watching people's reactions, when I show someone Halloween 4, that is my favorite moment, is seeing that reaction from the person of like, what the fuck? Who's seeing it for the very first time. So yeah, if I were to kill Michael, that would be, just load him up with bullets.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that Halloween 4 is one of the greatest endings in horror history. I mean, despite how you might feel about the rest of the movie or the potential of what they could have done, it is a great twist. So yeah, I mean, how would I kill Michael? I don't know. I don't think about those things. I just know that I think that ending to Halloween, I think Jamie Lee Curtis, Laurie Strode should have died at the end of Halloween 2018 with Michael going down. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine? Picture that scene. There she is. Get out, Karen, take out, get out. It's like bump, 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 and the house is going up, and Laurie is jumping on Michael and throwing, and you can see the years of rage. She's getting him. She's finally and it's not like she wants to necessarily die, but she doesn't want anything to happen to her child or her granddaughter. And she's telling them, she realizes all of a sudden it's too late, and she's yelling at them to get out, just get out. Say, it's like, no, Mom, I can't. No, there's this emotional moment. You know what I mean? It's like, no, maybe they're reaching through the slats, like, how do I open it? I gotta open it. No, don't you dare open it. Don't you fucking open it. You know what I mean? Because if she opens it, then Michael's gonna get out again, right? So it's like, it's this moment where instead of Michael just looking up at the three women and it's his girl power moment, it's this moment of emotional. It's Laurie's arc. It's that she had to do this to save her family. She sacrifices herself. She goes down, and Michael and her burn together in the fire, and it's so poetic. And
I want that ending you just described, simply for the fact that I can create such a great meme by taking the Celine Dion song from My Heart Will Go On and tying that into the Halloween moment, because I can picture that in my mind. And the memes like that's been such a popular meme now on the internet. Like, people will take My Heart Will Go On and they'll attach it to something like some a sports clip or some other shots in the movie. But no, that ending, I agree with that. Something that a great way to take the arc of her story and just bring it to full closure. And
Exactly.
Bob,
I absolutely agree.
Bob Big Fucker Cakes.
Bob Big Fucker Cake says, is Happy Halloween, Michael, almost as bad as Trick or Treat Motherfucker? No, not even close.
Not even close.
No. It wasn't it wasn't just the line. It was just,
the line was cheesy, but
it was cheesy. It was cheesy. But it wasn't Trick or Treat Motherfucker cheesy and drop kicking Michael through a window.
That's just stupid writing.
Yeah, it was just more it was too self-aware. Jamie Lee, like, I could let go Michael looking over the balcony and Jamie Lee Curtis being gone. Okay, a little, but I can let it go. It's kind of cute, borderline. Come on, don't be so self-aware, but okay. But then when she sort of just kind of like comes out of the darkness, like he used to do, and it's like, Happy Halloween, Michael. And it's just kind of like, oh, come on, guys. Like, you don't have to be, you don't have to do this. You can just have her, or maybe you don't see her face. Maybe he's standing there and it's black behind him. And all you hear is, all you hear is Happy Halloween, Michael. But you don't see her face come out of the darkness until she lunges forward. That would have been kind of cool. So you hear her say it, but you don't see her, but you hear her say, Happy Halloween, Michael. And it's like,
there was no need to try.
Like, what the fuck? And then she lunges and she comes into the light. It's like, oh shit. But to have her kind of come out, it's like, oh, come on. You don't have to be so self-aware like that. Sorry.
Well, not only that, but there was no need to try to duplicate, what Tommy Lee Wallace did in the original film, where the shots reversed. First it was Laurie standing there in the hallway, and then the slow fade of the light coming up, and you see Michael's face coming into exposure. They basically did the exact same shot they were trying to do anyways, but instead it was just so quick. You know what I mean? There was no subtlety. There was no, and I was like, we didn't need it. Again, the only reason why I say that is because with that film, there was so much shit that they were doing that we've seen already in the other Halloween films, that by that point, I had fucking finally had enough. I said, I'm so done with this fucking movie, and I'm done with the callbacks and the shit that they're doing. So anyways, Nathan Oswald.
Yeah, Nathan Oswald says, one thing I hate about Halloween H2O is that they never bother to explain what happened to Myers after the fire in H2. At least in H4, he was in a coma. Yeah, no, they were hoping that you would just bypass that, and he's not even burned. The only explanation you get in Halloween
until now, you're right, he wasn't even burned.
No, the only explanation you get is a throwaway line from that cop, the investigator, the taller black guy, who's like, they never did find his body. That's it. Yeah. That is just as throwaway as, no, that's just something people made up.
No, that's why I said H2O has not aged well at all. And the more I watch it, the more I realize this film fucking sucks. I mean, it really does. For continuity purposes, nothing what they're doing in this movie makes any sense. Now, if they had done H2O as a direct sequel to the original film, then that's fine. But because it was a direct sequel to Halloween 2, that's a I mean, he's right. Halloween 4, you know, people who want to debate me on it and talk about it's not a good sequel, they stuck to continuity. I mean, they made sure, like, okay, you know, he's there in the hospital fucking like looking like the mummy and shit. So they kept that continuity in there. H2O fucking totally derailed that shit. It made no fucking sense.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. It's something that I did. I'm not a fan of H2O anyway. Like I said, there's redeeming qualities. I can always find certain things, even in Halloween 5, I can find certain things I like, but I'm not a fan of H2O at all. So Nathan, you're right. It was very strange, and it was a little it was just kind of like, well, why aren't they? But they're just hoping that they never did find his body. They're just hoping that makes you go, oh, I guess, wow, I guess he got out somehow. Yeah, but well, where has he been for 20 years? How has he been shitting, pissing, and eating for 20 years? And nobody's seen this guy. Anyway, let's go on here. Let's see. There's one that came up here. Julian Salgado. Julian Salgado. Do you guys plan on watching Glass? How do you feel about the franchise? Tony, what do you think?
I've never seen, what is it? I've never seen anything that's part of it. I know there's Glass, there's a movie with James McAvoy that it's just his character, and then there's a movie with Bruce Willis, right?
Yep.
Like there's I don't know. I know enough. Basically, that's my knowledge of it, what I just said.
Right. I'm a big fan of Unbreakable. I wasn't a big fan the first time I watched that movie, but I watched it recently again not too long ago, and I actually quite liked it. Split, I have yet to see. So will I see Glass? I might, but it probably will be on like a Netflix kind of thing, because I got to watch Split and then I'll catch Glass online. You know, nothing too crazy about that. I've heard mixed reviews, but I'm not emotionally attached to the franchise. So, you know, but I know what it's about, and, you know, yeah. I'll watch it eventually.
So Tito Duran says he disagrees with me because what's my excuse for why Loomis was okay? Well, okay, if I have to refresh your memory, if you do recall the first time we see Loomis, he's walking with a cane down a corridor to the doctor's office. He also shows the doctor his hands, which is totally scarred up. You see the scarring on his face that he suffered from the burn. So if that by definition is your version of okay, well, I kind of disagree with that, because it clearly shows he has injuries from Halloween 2.
Yeah, no, he does. I mean, he's obviously, the injuries are not so severe that he obviously couldn't make it, but they did a decent enough job to show you, because they had it on his hand as well, and on his face, and, you know, he's walking with a limp and a cane. Now he clearly was affected by this explosion, but he was able to, either he was blown to the other side of the room where the blast, you know, where most of the heat and fire was not, or he was able to crawl out before it got too bad, but obviously he was really affected. That's not an issue. I've never had an issue with that. That's not a big deal. Tom Ferreira again says, I smiled when Michael got his finger because he deserved it so much. You mean got his finger blown off? His fingers, there's a lot of symbolism there too, guys, because this symbol, because he got these two fingers blown off. When you hold your fingers like that and you point it to the ground, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that's the sign of the devil.
It is. You're right.
So there's a lot of, when you understand that and you look at that scene and the camera shows his hand dripping blood. It's one of the best shots in the movie, actually. And it shows the camera is sort of low by his knees, and it shows his hand and the blood's just kind of dripping onto the ground. And then we kind of pan up that starting on that hand. It's a whole other, it's on purpose. It's like he's, you know, the devil's eyes, right? You know what I mean? So there's a lot of symbolism around that a lot of people probably went right over their heads. Nathan Oswald says, Dave, I love your rant in Halloween 5 destroyed the franchise. Thank you, Nathan. Appreciate that. That video, by the way, is up to like 50,000 views or something ridiculous now.
Yeah, I gotta agree with you. Everything great that Halloween 4 did was totally fucking shitbagged on in Halloween 5.
Oh yeah. It wasn't 4 that destroyed the franchise. I mean, like I said, it's not that 4 was a great movie, but 4 was good enough that it wasn't that movie that destroyed. It wasn't that movie that was the cause of the derailment.
Because
was
5 is
5.
tied to 4, and it just totally becomes a shit show.
Right. It was 5.
We were just talking about that with my brother during the game last night. We still don't understand the decision to why do you have Tina sacrifice herself to save Jamie when fucking Rachel and Jamie go through this whole ordeal through Halloween 4. You would think the logical thing to do, it should be Rachel sacrificing herself to save Jamie, not some new character that we have no investment with and annoys the fuck out of me throughout this whole movie.
I agree. I totally agree. Rachel should have lasted the entire movie, and Halloween 5 should have been about Rachel and Jamie's relationship and Dr. Loomis. And I think the movie should have taken place. Well, I have a video on that. I don't want to get too far into that, but I agree. I agree with what you're saying. 100%. I mean, it was a mistake to kill her off so early. And I know there are some people that use the argument, well, they killed her off so early because they wanted to show that anybody could die. If there wasn't so much incompetency and so much incompetence, I should say, around the set of Halloween 5 and the rewrites that were happening while everybody was on set and the shit show that the actual production of Halloween 5 was, I might agree with you. But unfortunately, I'm left to assume that there's no other reason for that than it was just a bad creative decision. Because look up the drama about Halloween 5. It was bad.
I've got a question for Dave. Do you think that studios are going to strongly take a look at maybe recruiting people off of YouTube as either consultants or creative consultants to movies with the success of the Vader film here that just was done in the future going forward? Because it seems as if fan-made films like that, fan-made films like yours that you've done with Halloween, they resonate with fans because you understand the property. Do you think studios will reach a point where their arms will be twisted enough that they might go, you know what? Maybe we need to bring on someone like Dave McRae to come in and be a consultant for Halloween, or someone like, what's his name, Star Wars Theory, who did the Vader film, to bring him in to be a consultant for a Star Wars film. Do you think that might be something down the road that we might evolve to?
I think that's entirely possible. I don't think that is anything that will happen anytime. Yeah. No, I think it's possible. But you would really have to be at a level that you can quantifiably prove that you know what you're talking about.
Sure.
And if you already work in the industry at some level, so you have the experience to back yourself up in terms of your understanding of the filmmaking process and the business of show business and how it all works. And you don't necessarily have to be working in Hollywood, in Los Angeles, making Hollywood films. But if you're working,
you have to be the director. I'm saying more.
Oh yeah, no. I'm saying, but no, I get what you're saying, and I'm saying the same thing. That even from that perspective, I think it can only be benefit. I think they would only turn to people who have a certain level of already established kind of understanding of how this business works. Sure. And I don't mean to take on the directing role. I just mean that I think I think it's possible. Yeah, for sure.
I just think it's funny that studios have never gone down that road because, again, who knows the continuity and the story arcs of these characters better than the fans? You know,
that's right.
You know, I never understood that with studios of like, you know, they think they know what they're doing. They think they know that, you know, what to give the audience. And then at the end of the day, you're stuck with, you know, a divided Star Wars universe. The Halloween fan base isn't really divided. I think it's not divided, but I think people are realizing, you know, the 2018 film and where it stands. And I think
it does happen. I mean, if you look at Ryan Turek's story, I mean, Ryan Turek is now heads up development for Blumhouse. He's a major Hollywood producer, and his story began sort of talking about horror and interviewing prominent people for horror. Granted, he lived in Los Angeles, which is the movie entertainment capital of the world, so obviously that helps. But he would go to conventions and try to get interviews, and he just knew a lot about horror. And he has a history, of course, with his own company and his podcast, Shock something or other, or whatever it was. I don't want to speak out of turn, but certainly he was not a producer working his way up, but he had such a vast knowledge of the horror genre and the horror industry and all facets of it that Blumhouse, Jason Blum, recognized this and brought him on board. And now he heads up development, I believe. I stand to be corrected, but I think it's something like that for feature films.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, of course, yes, it does. It can happen, but Ryan Turek wasn't just a guy passionate about horror talking on YouTube. He clearly had a track record of being involved in the film industry at some level. He was able to quantifiably show his knowledge, and he was able to meet and mingle and network. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, we want that guy, right? So it's not just about somebody talking about a movie and having a good idea, because a lot of people have good ideas.
Sure.
But if you can illustrate a level of maturity and understanding of the business as well, and the mindset, it can be quite impressive to certain people who are like, you know what, I like this guy, or I like this girl. Let's get this person on here, because you show that you're already sort of there, you know what I mean? And it's in that mind frame. So yeah, but I get what you're saying. I think that's entirely possible. Where this kind of thing is going to go and where these channels are going to grow. I mean, just on my channel alone. I mean, I work in the industry as a professional voice actor, so I have experience at certain levels dealing with producers and writers and shit from a voiceover perspective, which is really cool. But even through this channel, I've met so many interesting people that I had no idea were watching me. You know, people who work in Hollywood, people who work for film studios, who've reached out to me on their own personal time. They don't necessarily want credit or to be acknowledged, but they've been like, hey, you know, I love what you do, you know, keep it up. And I'm sure there are some people that watch that don't like what I do and don't like what I have to say either. But certainly, yeah, but certainly when you put yourself out there and you have something to say and you know what you're talking about, that can have an effect on people. Yeah, for sure.
Hey, the Film Addict here asked both of us, what do you guys think of Ghostbusters 3? I think the movie with the children of the original characters would be awesome. And thoughts? Well, on the teaser, I fucking loved the teaser. That was dope.
That was awesome.
That was really fucking cool. I was like, okay, I'm pumped for this.
Yeah.
Redeeming us from the 2016 Abomination. No offense if you like the film, but
I actually didn't mind it.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it's kind of like it depends on who you talk to. Some people liked it, some people didn't, but I'm looking forward to it. I think it's a great idea. It'd be interesting to see how they're going to go. It's going to be interesting to see how they deal with the Egon, you know, character, obviously with Harold Ramis not, you know, with us anymore. So I've heard some stories about his nephew. Did something to do with his nephew, because I guess there's a scene in Ghostbusters 1 or 2 where there's a sign that says something from his nephew, Uncle Egon, love his nephew or something.
I'm not sure.
I thought I saw something like that.
I'm not sure. I do know that word on the street is that this new Ghostbusters movie the main focus is going to be on 4 teenagers. Yep. More than likely 2 guys, 2 girls. And there might be a Stranger Things vibe. And that doesn't surprise me, because obviously the Stranger Things formula is hot right now. Yep. And, you know, okay. I mean, you know, I don't know. I need to know more. I like the idea of revisiting the old universe. I would love it. But for those who think that Dan Aykroyd, Ernie Hudson, and Bill Murray are going to be the stars of this new Ghostbusters movie, it's very apparent to me, since I made my excited video about it and I read a little more into it, that's not the case. I mean, they're not going to be the stars. They're not going to be. We're not going to be watching a bunch of fat 70-year-old Ghostbusters, old men running around shooting ghosts. It's just not going to happen. But I do think that they will probably have a role in the movie as themselves, unlike the 2016 remake, where Ernie Hudson, Bill Murray, and Dan Aykroyd were in the movie, but they weren't playing Ray Stantz and Peter Venkman and the fuck is Ernie Hudson's forget his name now. Oh, the chat room will tell us. Anyway, but they weren't playing those characters. They were playing different people. So to see them as their characters would be really cool. And Ivan Reitman, of course, has already said that this is more than likely going to be a passing of the torch.
Sure.
So, you know.
Winston
Zedmore. That's right. Winston Zedmore.
Hey, what about Vinny's question there regarding the Joker?
Vinny's question. Will the Joker standalone movie be a good movie? Well, that's hard to say. I'm hoping it is, because I really
anticipated films this year.
Yeah, same with me. I really like the casting of Joaquin Phoenix as the Joker. Yeah. And I think, although they're not saying it, and they're saying that this is a standalone movie, I think that somewhere in Warner Brothers, they're hoping this might be the beginning of a different DC cinematic universe.
I agree.
Because following the Joker will be the Batman.
And is it the Batman of the current DCU, or is it the Batman that's picked up from the Joker?
No, it's it's not even related to that. It's just a Batman standalone movie. So who's to say? So what? They're just going to make all these standalone films, which, okay, great. But it wouldn't surprise me that if they're secretly, inconspicuously sort of starting from scratch. Do you know what I mean?
True. Skate Tune. I like the name, by the way. Seriously, you guys are not interested in Rob Zombie's 3 from Hell? I got to tell you, here's my Rob Zombie filmography knowledge. House of a Thousand Corpses, Devil Rejects, and the Halloween films. I don't really watch his movies. Those are the only films that I've ever seen of his, so I can't really say much on that. Yeah,
I'm one sec. I'm not really a Rob Zombie fan, as you guys know. So I don't really care about any of his movies. I didn't mind The Devil's like Rob Zombie is a very specific kind of filmmaker who makes very specific kind of movies. So out of all of his movies that I've seen, I guess The Devil's Rejects was okay, but I don't really care about his movies. They're just not my kind of movies. So will I go see his movie in the theater? No. Will I watch it? No. No, I don't care. I don't care about Rob Zombie's movies.
The only 2 movies I paid for, one I walked out on to see in the theaters, was Halloween and Halloween 2. That's it.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
Devil's Rejects, because a friend told me I would be interested, and he knew I was a horror fan. I saw it, and then, of course, House of a Thousand Corpses, knowing that that's part of the storylines.
Right.
That's it. It's just, I'm with you, dude. Like, I've tried to watch a few of his movies, and I shut it off like halfway through. Like, nah, this shit is just not doing it for me.
Yeah, I just don't care about his style of horror. I would much rather. I'm more into things like I love the old Hammer films as well from Englund. I mean, some of those films are great. There's some great Japanese horror films. There's some great German and Italian horror films as well.
Sure.
And just a lot of the foreign horror is really good. Hollywood has a very sort of has a system and has sort of a routine. And when you start to look elsewhere beyond the walls of Hollywood, you start to get some real interesting, real nice horror. Really, and my kind of shit. Like when we're talking like psychological mood, atmosphere, I love that kind of stuff. Oh, there's such a laundry list of all different types of horror films and subgenres of those films as well. So just really cool. Hey, Jay, the movie maker. Thank you very much for your super chat. Says, love your videos. Oh, well, thank you very much, Jay, the movie maker. Appreciate that.
You want to take more?
Yeah, for sure. Sad Society says, hey, Dave and Tony, do you guys like Children of the Corn, the original? Oh, I do. It's a little dated now, but one of my favorite moments in that whole movie is when they're driving on the road and that kid comes out of fucking nowhere and they just boom. And it's just like, shit. Oh man, it's scary. It's scary.
Ooh,
So it's
David Lee Barron's got a good question for you there.
David Lee Barron. Yes. If y'all had to choose, who would you want to direct the new Halloween 2018 sequel? James Wan, Steven Spielberg, or David Gordon Green? I would probably say out of those three, I would probably say David Gordon Green. And the reason why is because I think James Wan is a terrific director, but I think stylistically it would change so much from the first movie.
Yeah.
It would be like, what the hell just happened here? It's like, and maybe it would be for the better. I don't know. But I just kind of like it. I just have this immediate feeling like, I'm just not sure if that's gonna, gonna jive. If he had started the sequel or started the genre, the 2018 film, maybe, but I don't know. Spielberg, no, it's not his
forte.
It's not his forte.
Well, I mean, because with Spielberg, you're gonna get something more along the lines of like almost like a Poltergeist movie, even though technically,
right.
Poltergeist, that was what's his name there? Oh my God,
Toby Hooper.
Sure. Yeah, Hooper directed it. But that's what he would do as far as if he were to take. So yeah, I would have to agree with you. Gordon Green would be the best one. And look,
just to keep it consistent.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's all. Just to keep it consistent. Okay, take a couple of more here. You go ahead and pick one there, Tony.
Okay. Not a movie related question, but what are your guys' beverage of choice? Dave, what's your beverage of choice?
My beverage of choice. Well, this is going to sound really funny and very kid-like, but I assume you mean alcoholic beverage. But when you said beverage of choice, I gotta say, it's going to sound really lame. I like a good chocolate milk. I don't know what it. I'm a big fan of chocolate milk. I like chocolate milk.
Again, this has to be the twin thing because my thing, I get one a day, except for in the summertime because in Georgia it's brutally fucking hot down here.
Right.
I love Starbucks venti hot chocolate. Their hot chocolate, whatever they do with their mocha and the vanilla that they mix in there, it's like fucking New Year's Eve in my mouth when I drink it. It's so
good. There's the quote, ladies and gentlemen, in the chat room for next week. It is like New Year's Eve in my mouth. Oh, the Tony memes that might be coming.
I expect it. But it is. It's really good, and I'm with you. Because the thing is, I don't drink. I don't drink alcohol. It's not by choice. It's not.
Right.
I just don't. I'm not a
big drinker either. So there you
wine
go.
on holidays with the family. Because I come from an Italian family, so yeah. I mean, you're gonna have the vino out there and whatnot with the sauce and everything. So yeah, I might have a glass. But yeah, I just never was. Even back as a kid when I would be at the parties in high school and college and stuff. I don't know, seeing people acting like a bunch of fucking morons never really turned me on to drink.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm the same way. I'm not a big, I'm be honest, I'm not a big drinker at all. It's just not something I really care about. You see, I have the kind of person, a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people, when they're in their teenage years and things like that, they will drink because they need to open up or they need to feel more loose and they need to sort of gain a personality. One of the things I get on my videos a lot in the, it's just like, dude, this guy's such high energy, or, take it down a notch, or, the coffee. I don't even drink coffee. I'm just high on life. I'm one of those energetic, very extroverted people. So it doesn't take much for me to go, woo! I don't need to just, I'm an actor. I can just turn it on and turn it off like that. It doesn't matter. So I don't need to drink to open up. So I'm not, I have obviously, but I'm not a big drinker either, obviously, because my default is chocolate milk. I mean, that's just fucking ridiculous. Okay, we'll take a couple more because we did begin a little bit late here.
All right.
Yeah. Let's see here.
Rosemary's Baby or Psycho from Michael Anderson.
Michael Anderson, Rosemary's Baby or Psycho. I might have to say, at this very moment, I've seen Rosemary's Baby sooner than it's been longer since I've seen Psycho. So I'm kind of leaning towards Rosemary's Baby, but yeah, that's a good question. What about you?
Oh man, that's really hard. Psycho, I mean, it's the granddaddy. It you could say it started the slasher, craze. Carpenter always, credits, Psycho as, part of his inspiration to get into filmmaking, along with some other films he saw as a kid in the theater and whatnot. Oh God, but then Rosemary's Baby, and oh my God, this is like one of those like questions of like, there is no right or wrong answer, because either one is they're both great, but they're both different too at the same time.
That's right.
It's like someone asking me what's my favorite Stanley Kubrick film. I can never answer that. I mean, Clockwork Orange has a special place for me because it was the first one. We read the book in high school and saw the movie in high school. And it so turned me on to just, how to properly frame a shot. If you guys follow me on Instagram, you can see from and Dave, you've seen some of my photos. You can totally tell I was inspired by Stanley Kubrick when you look at how I frame a photograph.
Oh yeah.
It's so like when people ask me that question, it's very hard to answer. And a question like this between Rosemary's Baby and Psycho, because I love Hitchcock. I can't answer that. Really can't. I can't answer that question. Sorry, dude. I wish I could.
Yeah, no, that's okay. David Lee Barron says, I auditioned for American Idol once, but I didn't get to see Ryan Seacrest or Celebrity Judges. Oh, well, that's unfortunate. Bob McFuckercake says, most overrated horror films. Well, I'm going to tell you, because this is just off the top of my head right now, I think A Quiet Place is extremely overrated. I didn't hate A Quiet Place, but I have major issues with that movie. And I just cannot believe that it got the critical acclaim and praise that it did. I think when I deconstruct it, let me try that again. When I deconstruct it, I can understand what people did like about it. I didn't hate the movie. Certainly there were things that I did enjoy about it, but I do, in my opinion, it's just my opinion, I think it's overrated.
Okay, so is Bird Box considered a horror film? Because I did not like that movie.
Yeah, I guess it is. It is a little bit.
Not too long ago, and I know that was one you had recommended to me. And
I liked it better than A Quiet Place.
Funny, it's like a reverse. It's
the
same reason why I like Quiet Place is the same reason why I don't like reverse what I just said there. You know what I'm trying to say? Bird Box was the same thing. Like it got all this like crazy hype, and I saw it, and I struggled watching it. It was just kind of one of those. I don't know why. I don't know if it's because I'm not a big Sandra Bullock fan. I'm just never. I mean, Speed is okay, but that's more Keanu than her.
Right.
Maybe it's just her. I'm just not. I never signed up to Sandra Bullock. I just never. I don't know. But if I were to answer that as far as true horror, as far as an overrated horror film, and since Nightmare on Elm Street was the theme tonight, I'm trying to think of a slasher film that people got hyped about. That Urban Legends. I didn't really like Urban Legends.
That was like 1998, I think.
Yeah, Daniel Harris and Michael Rosenbaum, two people
I
respect and admire, are in that movie. It just didn't really land with me. Didn't really like it.
Yeah, very cool. Interesting. Yeah, that I could totally see that. Okay, well, that's going to do it for Tony and I on this episode of Two Dudes and Some Bullshit. We appreciate everybody tuning in and watching Tony and I shoot the shit for an hour and a half about A Nightmare on Elm Street and Freddy and where we think they should go and what they should do and Robert Englund and who should play Freddy and stuff. It was kind of fun. It's always fun to shoot the shit about A Nightmare on Elm Street. And of course, as usual, remember, guys, if any news breaks about anything horror related and stuff, you know that Tony and I are always going to be talking about that stuff. So
we are.
Yeah, for sure. Now, if you want to follow Tony on Instagram and check out some of the awesome work that he does in terms of photographs and stuff, his link is in the description, and the links to my social shit's all down there too. So, any last things you want to say, Tony?
Well, are we on for this Sunday? Because the Super Bowl isn't for 2 weeks. So
yeah, I think so. I think we should be
for Sunday. Cool. So see you guys again on Sunday. You guys are getting a double dose of us this week.
That's right. Well, yeah, because we'll be off the week of the
Super Bowl. I'm going to the Super Bowl.
There you go. That's awesome. That's awesome. All right, guys. In the meantime and in between time, take care of yourselves and each other, as Jerry Springer would say. And I will talk to you guys soon. Also, hey, if any of you guys are big Masters of the Universe fans, I have a video coming tomorrow. It is fucking epic in terms of length. It's probably about 48 minutes long. And I go deep. I go, that's what she said. I go, it's a horrible joke. But I do. I go deep into the whole, it was probably one of the nerdiest, sweaty, nerdiest videos I've ever done. I lay out my concept for a Masters of the Universe movie because it's about time they get one off the ground. And I think I have finally cracked the code. So that video is coming tomorrow if any of you guys are big Masters of the Universe fans. So yeah. Anyways, Tony and I are out. We'll talk to you guys soon.
Later, guys.
Cheers.